Hello. There we go. Whoa. Sorry, guys. Live show. Here we go. Oh, man. After 70-something episodes, you think I get that right? All right. Hopefully, you guys hear me okay. Are you hearing double voices? Let me know live. How are you hearing Steve in the background there? Awesome. Oh, okay. Let me guys, I know you're a little delayed in the chat. Let me know if there's double voices on your end, or if you're hearing okay. Something really strange happened there. So let me just turn this off. Monitor off. Okay, there we go. Whew. Sorry, that's bizarre, huh? 72 episodes in, and I think you guys should be hearing okay. There's a little delay, so let me know down in the chat if the audio sounds funky. I actually messed with my USB setup. I got a new hub and was like rearranging, and so I'm assuming that may be what happened there, but so I apologize for that little clunky start. Welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. My name is Jeff, also known as the Revit Kid. I appreciate you guys joining me today. I've got an amazing guest I'm going to introduce soon. Many of you may know him from various locations on the internet. If you've used Revit over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to be talking about model health checks and just whatever. We're ready for anything today, and I'm excited to have the conversation. Before we do jump into the conversation, I wanted to first remind everyone that we are live. If you're here tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and feel free to chat, ask questions, and join the conversation. We always encourage it, as you know, and I always enjoy it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube so you know when we go live next, as well as when any other videos and whatnot are published. We got a couple folks from around the globe here: Stone Mountain, Georgia; Auckland, New Zealand; Quebec City. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Oh, that was Nick. Hey Nick, how's it going? From Quebec City. I didn't even read who it was. Before I introduce my guest and we jump into the content, I did want to first thank our sponsor, and so let's roll the clip and we'll talk a little bit about Twinmotion. So Twinmotion. Twinmotion is sponsored this season of BIM After Dark Live. For those of you that don't know what Twinmotion is it is a visualization tool, a real-time visualization tool built on the Unreal Engine. I have some awesome videos here on the channel that I will link below as far as full reviews of the tool and what it is. Some incredible features just released with 2022 and 2022.1, I guess you could say. And what I decided to do is actually, instead of diving into every feature, every week I'm going to highlight one or two things that I love about the new release. And so I'm just going to play a quick video showing you. This is Twinmotion 2022.1. And what I'm talking about here, or I want to show you guys here, is the Quixel Megascans library. So this is super cool. You saw those plants and rocks I just passed by. Those are a gigantic library from the Quixel Megascans library, which is hyper realistic, incredible textures. And then you can see I'm digging through a couple of the furniture families here, or furniture components here, I guess you could say. And I'm gonna throw down a bench and I'm gonna zoom in just so you guys can see the level of detail and the quality of the textures of these components. So yeah, we got Revit. We get to make our building objects, and now we can toss in these incredibly high resolution, high textured objects within them. You can see here I'm scrolling through some of the furniture families. I'm going to sign into Epic so I can place them. I'm going to place this stool, which is probably one of my favorite stool families they have in here because it's this really cool old drafting stool. And I'm going to zoom into it just so you can see what a Megascan object is. And the Megascan object is actually scanned using laser scanning and textures directly from the real world. And so you can see the level of detail on this stool, the stitching, the distressing, and so on and so forth. So you get the entire Quixel Megascan library built directly in to Twinmotion when you get it. So all that being said, definitely head on over to twinmotion.com/BIM After Dark and download and install a free trial today. So thank you, Twinmotion, for sponsoring this episode, and thank you guys for joining us. So without further ado, sorry for that somewhat delay there, Steve, but we were just talking. I was talking about the process and how it looks perfectly fine on your end, and it's different and polished on the front end, and then it's the least polished intro I've done in like 20 episodes. So welcome to the show, man. Steve Stafford, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I am great. So everyone, I want you to welcome to the show Steve Stafford. He's going to be checking out the chat, but I'll be checking out the chat as well. For those of you that don't know Steve, I'm going to have you do a little intro of yourself, if you don't mind, just telling folks who you are and why it is you're on this show talking about BIM and Revit.
All right. Well, I started using Revit in the year 2000, the year we were supposed to lose the internet because of the Y2K bug. And I downloaded it after a meeting. At a CSI meeting. I went there with some guys that I worked with, and we thought we would gang up on the guy that was making the presentation to dinner because he was talking about AIA, Condocs, UDS standards and stuff like that. And so we were in the middle of a hot debate at the office about which was better, AutoCAD or MicroStation. And so we thought we'd see what he thought. And he said, neither, Revit. And we didn't know what Revit was. He said, well, just go download it. It's online, revit.com. So I downloaded it at the office the next day and started playing with it. And I was excited. I thought, wow, this is really cool. I'd been using ADT and other stuff for a while. Mm-hmm. I thought there was some real promise, but I also knew at the same time we were arguing about Autodesk's products and Bentley's products. I'd never get a third party into the mix of things. So it took a while, but eventually I got a chance to actually use Revit at that firm on a project. And then because of the internet and so forth, I met people, went to AU, my first AU, talked to people there. And then I got a job offer in Southern California from Kimberly Allison, Tong and Goo, Jim Balding. He hired me. I moved out here. And so I was there for a little less than a year and a half before I went out on my own as a consultant. And I worked a lot with Cyril Relay, who has CDV systems in New England, and then built up some of my own clientele and so forth. So I've been a freelance consultant since 2005, technically. And I started my Revit blog, Revit Op-Ed, I was in the Honolulu office of WATG, Wimberley Allison Pongu. I went there. I spent a month there total, but a couple different periods of 2 weeks or something. And I started the blog while I was there. It was like, hello world kind of blog post. And Chris Zug of Zug Design, which ultimately became part of Augie's forums. And then Revit forums split off when Augie had its problems. I just kept blogging, and other people started joining the fray, and then it became a blogging nightmare. Tons of people blogging, and then you joined it somewhere along the way.
I sure did.
Yeah, and so you have gone way up there, and I have gone way down in terms of my intensity.
I think the Revit blogosphere is definitely different than it was in 2008, 2009, and so when I sort of started blogging it, and I actually think if memory serves me right, I think the first time we ever met was actually, I don't know if you remember this, but there was they used to do Autodesk used to do like pre-launches of like the Revit release for the bloggers, right? They would do a blogger day kind of thing. Right?
Yeah.
Remember? And I think there was one in Waltham, Mass that they did. And I don't remember what year it was, but it was like the first time I was invited to this thing where it was like all the other bloggers were in one room and they were like showing us all the new features, and we basically all just wrote the same post and then pressed publish when the NDA lifted, one of those things.
Yeah.
But I have to say, the nice thing about the content that you've produced is, I can almost guarantee you that out of the, currently 65 people that are here live and the, over 2,000 that'll watch this video from now until next week, they've all run across a blog post of yours or a Revit forum response of yours in the last
whether it's right or wrong,
5 or 10 years. And so super excited to have you on it, because I've definitely run across them in the past, and even, one of the things that I think Brian Myers, him and I were tweeting a little bit, and was saying, as much as, because I think it was 2008 or 9 when I started blogging, and so you were already 4 years in at that point of Revit content, I would imagine, maybe.
Yeah, I think my first post was December of 2004.
Yeah. So what's funny is I find myself using the blog sometimes as almost like my own little search query of like something that I did 5 years ago that I remember posting about, and it actually almost becomes my own little notepad. So regardless of what the intentions were, it's there, right?
a funny related tale. I spend most of my time here. I don't seldom travel anymore, which is kind of nice. I've been working for one primary client 2.5 days a week, and then I work for other clients on the other 2 days of the week. And the primary client, I spend the majority of my time, well, at least half a week, with one of the guys. He's actually Dynamo programming. They hired him for his programming skills and so forth. So Alexis sent me a question. He's getting hit up with a typical Revit kind of question. Mm-hmm. And he asked me, I don't even remember what it was now, but he asked me this question, and I said, gosh, I don't think that's possible. And it was like 2 seconds later, he sent me a link to my own blog post explaining how to work around it. And I said, well, I guess it's possible. and I've forgotten how to do it.
Yeah.
And he wrote, he wrote back. It was funny. He says, well, if there wasn't a perfect case of I've forgotten more than you'll ever know kind of thing. It's like,
I've been there. I've definitely been there.
It's why I've started off blog posts, note to self. Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes I'm going to blog this, because if I forget this, I can at least search for it later.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's great. So I guess the topic for today, you and I were chatting about what we can talk about to try and keep it within a theme at least. And again, everyone on the chat, feel free to ask any questions. We're excited to chat and be here with you guys today. But sort of the topic on hand is I think it sounds like it's a lot of what you've been focused on quite a bit these days, which is I said model health check, model health screening, but there's a whole variety of what goes into it. And I know we do have a lot of BIM managers that watch the show. There's a lot of architects, engineers, et cetera, obviously all usually using Revit, but I think it is a topic that's on the front of people's minds. And so maybe just in general, when we started talking about that, what did you have in mind? Like, what does that sort of encompass as far as what it is that you're doing, you find you're spending a lot of time in Revit doing right now?
Well, when you first asked me if I'd want to talk, I thought, no, I don't have anything to say. But I'm flattered that you said people were interested in having me talk. And I mean, I mentioned too that part of the reason I haven't spoken at AU or Built or RTC in many years is there's the truth of the matter is there's just a lot of talent out there that has a lot of interesting perspective. I mean, there's, like Hassan, who's created a whole, firestorm of his own kind of intellect out there. Yeah. So there's Dynamo and all these other kinds of things. So there's just so many more people that want to share. And if I felt like it was work, why should I, steal a chance for somebody else to speak just because I have some name recognition or whatever. So I backed away from it. And the same thing is true for my blogging, but, so what I do, a lot of my time is spent with what's loosely called project health, which is this project's crashing, this project isn't crashing, but the people are complaining about it or that sort of thing, and it's dealing with troubleshooting issues or ideas about how to solve certain design ideas they want to get into. But in my old days of doing project troubleshooting, I just had an Excel spreadsheet. I'd open a model, I'd look at things, and I would try to fill out the spreadsheet. So I'd start with, how long does the file take to open? Right. How many links were there? How many DWGs? How many imports? How many groups? How many things could I purge if I just purged?
Right.
And so all those metrics I would use to try to gauge the health. And then I had this document that I would write up for clients that basically explained what each of the items was, and that why one particular, 25 Revit links. Gosh, that's a lot of links. Do you really need that many links? But it's like, well, if you do, you do. But right. Just realize that Revit's going to take longer to open. So that morphed when I started working with these guys a lot, because they have Alexis. And so we went through, this firm also uses Clarity now. So Clarity is an interesting product because it could do a lot of things, and it can automate a lot of things. And one of the things it automates is an extraction. It opens files overnight and extracts a lot of data, and then that data sits in a place. And so we started initially looking at the data that Clarity was giving us with just Clarity's own tools, which was interesting. But then Bill DeBevic, who works there, he started putting it together into a product called Tableau. And then Tableau was summarizing all the things that would take me 2 hours to extract and analyze on my own within Revit. Was suddenly, at my fingertips in the morning. I could just go browse through and look at the worst projects, so to speak, the ones with 5,000 warnings.
Yeah. So actually, I mean, I think you're being a little humble in the sense that not thinking that people actually want to hear about this. So I think you need to, I just sort of to let you know, like, Asan was on the show last week, and and John Pearson, Dynamo, and Rhino, and
I love those guys.
All that stuff, right? There's obviously a lot of different things going on, but the truth is, like, this, the heart of the matter is still, we're all still using Revit, and there's all still standards we're trying to keep, and there's, we're all still using models, and when models suck, it sucks for all of us, right? So I do think that there's definitely value in this, and people are definitely interested in it. And I'm actually interested in, you mentioned sort of before some of these tools that exist now and actually it's funny that you said that, because one of my favorite tools in PyRevit is actually the model, the
pre-flight. The pre-flight.
I was just to give like
looking at that too.
A quick overview, like it it's fantastic for that. But I guess
we're actually looking at so Tableau. We're looking at getting rid of Tableau, and because we started using Power BI. And so what I'm good enough in Power BI to wreck it and then have to call Alexis. Why is my report not telling me what I want to see? He says, well, you got to click this other button.
There, I swear.
Yeah. So but what I've been trying, the way that Tableau gave me information, I got used to seeing and knowing what I wanted to see. So I'm just trying to get Power BI to do the same kind of thing for me. And I was also hoping that pre-flight would cook some of that stuff up for me in the same way. And it does. I mean, it gives me some of the numbers, and the graphs are interesting just as a glance kind of thing. Part of the equation too, I don't do it as much, but the guy that I report to, I'm technically a consultant to these guys. So I don't have any authority. I can say, this is terrible, you shouldn't do it, but gosh, good luck.
Right.
So if I had authority, I might be a bigger jerk, but somebody else gets to be the jerk.
It can be easy.
So
sometimes.
So well, they all like me. They don't have to like him. So
right.
Well, I hope they like me. Yeah. So the Power BI reports. Right now, we're trying to get those. There's a report for like me that I want to see, and then there's a report for him, so he can sit down with the people in the teams and describe why they should care about some of these things. And I mean, one of the things we observed was all the structural files had, not all of them, but a large percentage of them had over 1,000 line styles.
Mm.
Why? So why did we need 1,000 line styles? So when we started looking more closely, we realized that the technology group had recreated the AutoCAD layer standards that they had used for decades in AutoCAD and just recreated it inside Revit. So there was a yellow color for every line weight. There was a green color for every line weight. Oh, yeah. And so when I looked at the number of line weights, or rather line styles in the project, I discovered that, well, there's only one being used of all of them. And they're only using the regular office line styles for what's really being used or what's really necessary for, detailed drafting views, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we can get rid of 900, line styles right now
that
because
they're
not being used. Well, I mean, I think of it as it's an accumulation problem, right? So sure, you can have 20 sinks in your template, you can have 40 toilets, but are you going to use them all?
Right.
So you have to decide. And in the old days, we called it the additive or subtractive template mindset, where it was, I want everything in the template, and I will get rid of that which I do not want.
Right.
And I'll have the additive approach where you have an empty box, and I'll fill it.
Yep.
And so you got to find a happy medium.
So I'm interested. I actually kind of want to go back to the idea of the additive subtractive, because that is something that I get asked still to this day all the time. Is what families should I? What families shouldn't I? But I think before we move on to that, I am interested, and I think someone asked about was something about Excel. But when you mentioned sort of when you first started digging into the idea of troubleshooting, and you had the Excel sheet and you would go in and before tools and automation and all that stuff. So I am interested though, because a lot of us now, like you said we have tools now, so we can just click it and go through it. But at some point in time, someone needed to develop those tools, and someone needed a path of logic for development of those tools. And so I'm actually just more interested in the old school way, if you would manually review and troubleshoot a model. I mean, what would you say would be your hierarchy of things to look at? Let's say it's a model that's chugging, they're having issues or whatever the issue might be, corruption, saving, who knows, whatever, right? What would you say would be like sort of your hierarchy of what you would look at before all these tools? When you open this model from somebody and they said, "Help me," what would you say is your number one, number two kind of things that you would explore? Like, is it warnings first, and so on?
Well, it's really the same things I look at today. It's just I can see them easier. So it's first of all, performance, all of that sort of stuff is a very perception based experience, right? I mean, I remember in AutoCAD the first time I tried to use hidden line in 1995, and it took 20 minutes. And I would hit hidden line and I would go get coffee or something, and I'd come back and it might be done. Right. Today, we're getting angry if we don't get an instant render, it's and true. Now with Enscape, it's always there, available to you if you want it. Mm-hmm. I can live in the rendered world the whole day. Mm-hmm. So that stretch of what people perceive, it gets exaggerated as we go. So right now, I mean, we'll get a ticket for this model is behaving erratically, or it takes forever to open. And then we open it and there's 10 links. So it takes 5 minutes or something, or 3 minutes to open, just depends on the situation. Mm-hmm. And the file opens pretty quickly. And then if you talk to the person that wrote the ticket and said, "Hey, this file is opening really, really slowly," and you find out that, well, 3 minutes is an eternity to them because they're sitting and watching a little blue circle go around and around and around, waiting for it to open. So the question becomes, is 3 minutes too long? And I would, the files that used to take 15 or 20 minutes to open are opening in 3 minutes now.
Right.
So between like Revit 2016 and 2018, a massive improvement occurred there. And then 2018 to 2020, the same thing. 20 to 22, it's been, my experience is the single biggest problem I find with opening files these days is links.
Yeah.
And there's no way to escape the number of links without, I mean, demand loading worksets for linked files, that kind of thing. You get to control what opens initially. And the crashing that we used to experience on open with Revit Server, I don't see that kind of thing happening as much on BIM 360 these days. But Revit Server, I developed a personal theory that the more links you had, the more dodgy the chances of opening a file over time would be. So you were better off closing the links via the workset, opening the file, getting Revit open, and then loading links as a separate task, because it seemed to be able, the process of building the file and loading it into RAM was the volatile, dangerous time,
right?
Especially going over the internet or the network, the WAN with Revit Server.
Yep. Yeah, I actually remember when you were saying, the 20 minutes versus 3 minutes. I remember was it the 16 gig switch? Do you remember that? When Revit couldn't recognize the total RAM you had or something. So and in those days we were splitting models because we couldn't physically open them, right? You couldn't physically open certain size models.
Yeah, I have to
come a long way.
I have to talk people out of splitting models now. Because people are so used to, I have to have a furniture model. Why do you need a furniture model? Well, because the project will be slow if I put all my furniture in the models. Like, maybe not. That's a used to problem. It's not the same problem anymore. Thankfully, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
So because you have the highest level of integration if all the stuff's in the same box. So splitting it into these different boxes it's counterproductive if you can avoid it.
Yeah. So as far as links, right? I mean, obviously in open that makes sense. As far as performance while running, is that...
links don't really.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of point clouds, that's gonna slow things down. Yeah. Waiting for a view to regenerate, that kind of thing. I'm fortunate that the range of projects we're dealing with. We have some high school projects where there are 15 buildings, 6 disciplines, everything's linked together. Yeah. We had one high school, middle school, elementary school project that was something like 33 models a piece. And they wanted to interlink them between high school and, the middle school buildings needed to see the high school buildings. It was all one giant campus. Right. So the site model had something like 60 links in it. And that sucker was, even today, it's still a 35, 40 minute wait to open it. So if somebody says, "Oh, I want to relocate a building on that site," I was like, "Oh God, I've got to open the site model."
Yeah.
So
now we have the model open, and now we're we've discovered what links there are, bad, good, whatever, right? I know if they have 100 CAD links and half of them are missing references, there's obviously issues there. But now we're in the model and we're looking at things, and so I immediately think of things like you were just saying. There's line styles, right? All the line work.
Well, before I get to the minutia in the file, I'm looking for the big ticket performance hits, the stuff. So as soon as I got a file open, I've got a sense of how many files are forcing Revit to take longer in the first place. Then I start looking, I take a look at warnings, because I want to see what kind of warnings are relating to room area calculation volume, because those things are calculated as you go. And if there's a bunch of warnings related to rooms, then Revit's, I think of it as, if you want to think of a little guy tracing the walls inside the computer. So for every boundary that it can't resolve, the guy's going around the room a few times until he says, "Oh, screw it, next room," and does it again. So if you can kind of, make these actions human and think in terms of like, well, if I had to measure that room and then I couldn't figure out where the wall started and stopped, what would I do?
and then I kept trying and trying.
So the computer's doing that too. So you're asking the computer to wander around the building and and struggle with these values. Thankfully, it does it really fast, but it's still CPU cycles, right?
Yeah.
So
And it would have been a lot slower 6 years ago, 5 years ago, right? It's just
Yeah,
doing it faster.
the opening screen of the projects now, the dashboard that we have, has a schedule that's just unplaced unbounded rooms. So it confronts the team with that list. And if they've got a bunch of rooms that haven't been placed, I mean, you get this classic sort of, I mean, I remember a decade ago, the first time I ran across a project that had 7,000 warnings or something. And they had decided they needed to do a what if scenario. So they had duplicated the entire program for an entire new hospital building. So it was like 3,000 rooms. And then they decided to just copy it all over on top of itself. So it quickly went up to 7,000 odd warnings. Wow. I remember going to a RTC conference in Sydney. I think it was Sydney. It might have been Melbourne. But I was doing a talk, and I said, I was just curious with a show of hands, how many people have seen 5,000 warnings? Or actually, I said, would everyone stand up? I said, so everyone who's never seen more than 5,000 warnings can sit down. And we got up to, I think we got up to 30,000 before everyone was down.
30,000.
Yeah. Well, since then, I've seen over 300,000. So never underestimate the ability of people to increase those numbers.
Oh, man. No, that's awesome. And that's kind of, I mean, already.
What's that, Office Space?
Yeah.
Office Space one, you gotta bump up those numbers.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, oh my God, save us.
Yeah. So no, that's interesting, because that was kind of where I was going next, was like, looking into the open speed, links is obviously a massive one. And then performance wise, warnings is kind of where I was sort of going to start leading anyways, because I was interested in that's kind of where my mind would go. But then, that nugget in there of how you're looking at warnings and which are the big chunks. And that's great. I mean, the rooms and areas and calculations like that are huge ones. I mean, again, we know how many various types there are, but
once I get past the perception stuff, the stuff that you can sort of detect, or it's the death by 1,000 cuts, where you're constantly being poked in the eye with this annoying thing every time. I start digging into the model from a critiquing standpoint, which is like, all right, why are there so many in-place families grouped in a raid? Oh, you needed fins on the exterior, and we didn't have a more efficient way to distribute that stuff across the surface of the building. I drew one, I copied it a whole bunch of times. I know how to do that. So that happens.
Yeah.
I mean,
I believe
I saw it in a file yesterday. I was in a file a couple of years ago that had an individual ceiling for every ceiling tile. I mean, every ceiling tile in the building was an individual ceiling.
Yeah.
And I thought it was crazy, but at the same time, I thought, somebody wanted to count them. I don't know.
Perhaps, yep. Or they couldn't see the grid in 3D. I see that a lot, because the grid is a surface pattern, and that may be one. But actually, before we move on, the warnings is huge. But there was a little discussion going on in the chat, and I think Nick from Revit Pure asked.
I don't see chat. So
you're
is
not
that
seeing the chat?
No.
Maybe there's a delay or if you go to the link on YouTube, you should see it. But
it's in a YouTube.
It's
chat.
on the YouTube chat. Sorry, yeah.
I see. Okay, I'm thinking that. Of course, it's not in the Zoom chat.
It's not in Zoom. No one else is in Zoom with us now.
You didn't invite everyone in. Yeah.
No, not this time. Yeah. Maybe one day we'll do that, where we'll do a live stream, but it's a private live stream. It's only Zoom with some guests. But
before I forget.
Oh yes, yes.
Before I forget, this event used to be your happy hour, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So it started out as your happy hour, and then it became more formal, and now it's stayed with Mr. Op-Ed on it. And
yep.
So now you'll be going into retirement soon, because you've reached your peak.
Right. The pinnacle. I'm at the pinnacle now.
Yeah. Right. Well, you've had Paul on a bunch of times, so
I have. Yep.
You already hit your pinnacle.
No.
You're backsliding now. All right. So I happen to really like Redbreast whiskey, and a good friend, we went to a whiskey taste. Actually, it's a bottle kill, which means she's got more bottles than eat a lot of bottles, and we all get to taste whatever's there. And the idea is to kill what's left of these bottles.
Fair enough.
So anyway, he has a 27-year, the most recent release, Ruby Port cask, I think it is. It's 27-year. I believe it's a $800 or $900 bottle. Well, he was nice enough to give me a sample of it, so I thought this is a good occasion to actually finally taste it. So
cheers.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, part of the reason why I like doing this at night, even though depending on where the guests are, is it makes more sense to have a cocktail as opposed to 12:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah. So awesome. on the heels of that, I have some Red Bush, just in case, awesome. I get too nervous. And
awesome. What was it good? How was it?
Need some courage. Yeah, it's very good. It's a lot. The cask that it's finished in, I didn't expect quite so much influence on it, but it's good. It's not a very high proof one, so it doesn't have too much of the classic burn or whatever. But I tend to just sip whiskey anyway.
Awesome. I mean, it was only fitting that after talking about models with 30,000 warnings that we had a drink. So the conversation was actually around when we were initially talking about links. There's a little conversation going on about file size, and I'm interested if and I think it was probably along the lines of when we were talking about breaking models apart versus not. I know back in the day, and what I was referring to was kind of, there was basically there was a max file size in Revit when it opened, right? You would hit, what was it, 700 megs, something like that. It was like the number at the time. I don't remember, depending on what you had.
I think it had something to do with RAM, your available RAM, that kind of stuff.
And so I know that doesn't exist anymore. Fast. Right. So I guess the question kind of from the chat that people are talking about is there a maximum single file size that
believe it or not, I don't think about file size anymore. Now, in fairness, most of the projects I work on these days they're hosted in BIM 360 now. So it's the number that you get for the file size. We haven't sorted that out yet. Sometimes we seem to see numbers, like Clarity will grab a number and then we'll look at the number and realize, that's with all the links.
Right.
And then we see another number and it seems smaller, and it's like, for some reason we're not getting the links included. Maybe they weren't opened, something. So when we really want to dig deeply, we might actually just download the files from BIM 360 and see what the file size is once they've been, zapped to a hard drive. But that's removing history and other kinds of stuff, so it's not a true measure.
Yeah,
I think I'm grateful. I think that I don't really have to worry about the fact that the model's 800 meg or 2 gigs or something. Most of the projects you see these days are under a gig.
Yeah.
But there are certainly more than 300 or 400. And performance, I just don't think about it, which it's really great that I can. Now, if we were on a standalone server or Revit server, the file size is more obvious. You can see it. And I would look at file size if it started to balloon. But you got to realize file size is influenced by the number of active users. It's influenced by the number of links and things that you embed in it. So, I mean, load some big raster images for your site plan or something, and you find file size goes up, but doesn't really hurt the project.
Right.
We actually did an experiment in the office yesterday. One of the other guys was curious, and we were arguing about current view only for DWGs. And so one of the guys took a file and saved it empty, loaded a link or linked in one file, current view only, and then copied it to more views. And it only increased the file size, a few kbytes per instance, which is how Revit deals with family content. So, if you have a 400 megabyte toilet or something, you get a 400 kbyte hit for the first instance, and then you get an incremental tinier value for every instance placed thereafter.
Yep.
And that's true pretty much of everything.
And that's one of the things when it comes to family size. There's actually a post. I'll have to find it. I'll link it in the bottom. I think it was actually it's an old post, and it was Bradley Bradley toilet partitions. They had some decent Revit family content posts they did a long time ago. It was probably 2011.
Yeah.
Pull it up. But part of it was
talking. Daniel, somebody. He used to blog. He did a lot of. He either was responsible or built the content. I can't remember.
And they always have great content. But one of the blog posts was exactly that, and I think I pulled it up a couple weeks ago, sort of talking about the idea of like, yeah, it's a gigantic family, but it doesn't mean that it's 100 megabytes. I'm not saying it's 100 megabytes, but 100 megabytes 100 times. It's not how
I did work on a project for a $50 million house that had column families that were in it. Oof. That were 1 gig each. Oof. I don't know how it happened. I don't know where the columns came from. I couldn't figure it out. But once we got rid of the columns, the file size went.
Yeah. So I guess the way, because I agree. I agree. File size I don't think is as big of a deal anymore. I guess the way I see it, I'm curious your opinion on this is, depending on the building, the project, and the model, when you open it, and then you look at the file size, is that something that maybe where you'll see if you're saying, like, let's say it's a 2,000 square foot residential home, not even like high end or something, but you've got a gig model, is that something where you're like, that raises some red flags?
Well, yeah, it really comes down to how much stuff you're going to stuff in the model. And I would, Scott Brown, right? Mm-hmm. Does that name mean something? Yeah. He was one of the very earliest people involved in zoo design. Really great designer, power Revit user. He joined WATG prior to me, and then his intention was always to move to Florida. So he took up residence in Florida and worked for their office there until they closed it. Mm-hmm. I believe he's still with Beck, but anyway, Scott had a personal sort of rule of thumb, which was whatever your file size is at SD, it'll be 3 times that at CDs. Mm-hmm. And that's reasonable. I mean, think about the number of details and things that get added. The more detail that gets added to the model, the documentation, the sheets, annotation, everything else. Sorry, I'm wiggling around here. My chair is messing with me. So yeah, file size, that kind of stuff's going to increase as a result of it.
Okay, so if we're talking about sort of this troubleshooting, working down the flow of the hierarchy, so we talked about warnings a little bit there. I don't know, I mean, as far as area calcs, room calcs, I mean, what are the other big ticket items in warnings that if someone out there is like, I don't know what to do when I look at this list of warnings, how do I filter through this and look for the ones that are really going to have an impact? I mean, what other ones would you say you would look for in a list of?
Well, like I said, I start with calculation. That's performance hit. Then I drill down into stuff that's quantification, items that are going to create problems from scheduling, counting, making sure that we have just one of these things where one is required. Mm-hmm. And then the third tier, they're not really tiered. They're all sort of equal in a sense, but the last is quality, documentation quality. Is the information accurate? So do I have duplicate type marks? Does that mean a P1 isn't a P1 unless I'm looking at the right thing?
Right.
So, when we talk about Revit stuff, as a Revit focused person, everyone always expects me to think in terms of pure Revit language, right. But the truth of the matter is Revit's just a tool. And if the quantities that we say are required and the information that we display in the drawing that somebody ultimately holds in their hand or looks at on an iPad is wrong because we didn't clean things up, then that's worse. That's almost worse to me than performance. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, so you had to wait an extra few minutes for something to happen, but did you notice that all your door marks are wrong? And all your window tags are wrong. Right. So now you're going to get 4 RFIs for every window in the project for some reason. Yep. So it's the same sort of look I would get from people when you're the Revit trainer and I asked for some trash paper so I could sketch something. Mm-hmm. Or I would go up to the whiteboard and start sketching something. So I would talk about curtain walls, and I would talk about the curtain grid and the mullion and the panel relationship and why there isn't a placement line, a location line for curtain walls. It's like, well, everything that you put on a curtain walls depends on where you drew the line in the first place. Right. So I would sketch that, and people are like, you're not supposed to sketch. You're a computer or CAD guy. Why would you be reaching for sketch paper? I'm like, because it's efficient. And the other thing I would say is, I've gotten more than a few requests for help with design options, and what I would hear in the description is, well, we're thinking about doing this, we're thinking about doing this, we're thinking about doing this other thing. And I said, is this something that the client is asking you to think about, or are you guys just thinking about this internally? And I said, have you convinced one another that one of these is better than the other? No. Well, why are you doing it in Revit at all then?
Right.
Because the only reason to articulate a design option inside Revit is because you need to convince the client. So if you can't convince yourselves, it doesn't belong in Revit yet. It ought to be on trash paper. You ought to be able to talk about it.
Right.
Just the way that you and I can talk about a Revit feature abstractly, and we can sort of let the wheels spin in our head and think about, should I use design options for this or phasing? Should I use groups or should I use links? We don't need to open Revit to think about those things at all. So it's like it's the same kind of creative process. And recognize that as a Revit guy, I'm not there to be in the way. I'm not trying to tell them how to design or that sort of stuff. I just want to try to help them use the tool efficiently.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Phil Reed is famous for saying it in AU once. Well, I think he's famous for saying it, but he said, SketchUp is time well wasted. And if I can put 5 designers on a cheap tool and get to the right solution faster, that's a win.
Yeah.
So I'm paraphrasing, but that's the idea.
So along those lines, somebody in the chat is asking about, and I think this kind of goes along the lines of maybe not Revit, Revit-y talk, but at the same time it is, because there is sort of I don't know if I call it a myth, because some people would say they proved otherwise or not, but the amount of annotated and detailed lines versus not. And the reason I sort of tie that into the whole duplicate marks stuff is that, in theory and in practice as well, there is, some truth to, if you're drafting everything versus modeling specific elements, then you may not be specifically coordinating your building correctly and revising whatever. But I guess as far as the model health check and whatnot, is annotation objects and detail items and text, is that something that you look at as a heavy hitter or not really?
What I look for is trying to reduce the instances of Revit's. I don't even know how to describe it really. Revit's insistence on duplicating and protecting the kingdom from external families that are the same as the one that I've already got in the kingdom. So the family 1, family 2, family 3, family type 1, family type 2, and that's that whole iterative process that Revit does when you start loading content. And this firm started using a veil to manage content. So when you anytime you use the copy paste option to load a family, you're risking the introduction of a new family that's the same as the old family, but it's coming from a different place, or it has different type values or something. So Revit desperately wants to protect the original. And so it's not uncommon. I mean, the most common one is the break line symbol, where you have break line 29, and they're all being used. I've written a couple blog posts, preaching about the idea that there should be one person who's responsible for content, and that you should ask that person to load content, and they're most aware of what content's been loaded into an active project, and then you can reduce the numbers of those. And then when that does, it's not like I want one person to have to live and breathe that job, but one person just to decide, go ahead and load that, and just decide who and when the content. And the other thing is if you load a new family, just sync as soon as you do that. Because if you sync before you start using it, you'll get a warning message that there's already one been loaded. So if 2 people load the same family at the same time, the first one who syncs wins. Right. The second one is an iteration, and then you get the naming increment starting to happen. So because of that, the sync will allow you to at least respond to the warning message and be aware that there's now 2 of those same families, and you should use the original, and then you can get rid of the old. The other problem we run into is the detail views, drafting views. That's got a lot of detail content and detail items. So when you load one of those in from a sheet, or if you load a whole sheet in, you end up with a whole series of incremented families. So trying to keep the content that you use on a single project coming from a single source, that's really hard. I mean, it's damn near impossible to prevent it entirely. I've worked on a hospital project that company, they probably paid me $10,000 to clean those things up over the course of 6 months, just routinely going in and cleaning it up. And it mattered because they were doing equipment procurement out of information derived from the model. So when you had duplicate objects, so you have this blood infuser or something, and you've got 40 of them, and they're really all the same one, but it looks like you got 40 different ones.
Yeah.
People start getting angry at Excel, So,
so I think this actually could be a good way to venture back to that idea of additive versus subtractive templates, and because I guess first, what's your opinion on it as far as, is there better or worse between, or is it a happy medium?
In the old days, I was more inclined to be a subtractive. Let's put a lot of stuff in there and remove it. More recently, I've been sort of forced to live in the additive world. It seems like more people want a trim template that they then add. These guys most of the templates are pretty slimmed down, but what they're finding is happening is that the different markets that they work in, they're being forced into templates for markets, and the content that's loaded into each of those markets is different. But it's and also Alexis happens to be doing a builder project, so they're working at building. So when a project kicks off, a questionnaire kind of thing where it creates the template for them and sets it up. Yeah. So that would load the sheets, the kind of content that they're expecting to use, and then each of those markets is getting more informed about what they want. We had a long period of time where there was turnover and so forth, that kind of thing. So there wouldn't be a strong voice about what a certain discipline needed to have in a model. Yeah. And so I think somebody once told me that even a big firm has one prima donna, and they sort of set the tone for things. And so even some of the firms that escape that notion is like RHOK, SOM, AECOMS. There isn't a single architect that people think of when you think of those firms. Right. But lots of other firms, when you think of the prime founder, right. And then their culture or their perspective, pervades everyone else's thinking. And I think that same kind of thinking is probably true for how firms adapt to Revit or Rhino or SketchUp or any kind of thing is whoever the most convincing, persuasive person who has some skill, has earned the respect of people in a firm, generally gets to set the tone for that. Yeah. And other people are just happy to go along.
Yeah. No, I think you touched on something there that's important, though. It's as far as the additive versus subtractive the work you're doing makes a big difference too. If you're going to do a subtractive model, if you're doing healthcare and K through 12, you're going to have a gigantic initial model, and then what do? You scrap all the healthcare right away, and so then you end up making templates for each, or you do the additive.
Yeah. What did Aaron say? I don't remember. Did Aaron say in his template talk how big his template is before you draw anything?
Yeah, I think he did. It's a pretty big one.
Yeah. But the thing is that's the degree to which he takes that means as soon as you start drawing things, your documents start being filled out. Right. And things. That was really the intention of the template. The fact that you would put sheets and views on sheets and organize things. It's an ongoing argument I have in various places now. It's like, why do you have one sheet in this template? That means that every person on the team, every team has to build all the sheets. Well, why do you really want them doing that? Is that an effective way to spend their time? And I don't think it is, but some people want them to literally think about the cartoon set and
The
work through that
organization, yeah, yeah.
I can appreciate that from a mentoring perspective. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I've got some junior architects and I'm trying to teach them how to do this, or I've got some
Right.
EIT intern engineer who doesn't really know what a set of documents looks like. So making them go through that
Mm-hmm.
process is good. But on their 10th, I think they're going to start resenting you. I joke, I joke about being poked in the eye about stuff all the time. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I would tell somebody, it's like, look, if you're doing something and you feel like Revit is poking you in the eye, ask so you can stop getting bloodshot eyes. Because chances are that, if there isn't a better way, we can at least identify something that we could ask for a better way.
Yeah, and I do think that the tools that are available now also help with either approach to it, right? I think, like you mentioned, the family browsing tools that exist now and the organization tools with families are great for both additive and subtractive templates, right? And then also the tools that help you selectively purge and wipe models to a level that we couldn't before is also extremely helpful, right? So I think that goes either way. But I do 100% agree that pre-building sheets is I mean, why would you not? I mean, even when I'm doing my smaller residential work, my template has floor plans, sections, elevate, all those sheets are there with views on them. I mean, worst case, you rearrange them, whatever. But for the most part, it's like it's there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
well, it's
and
it's
they don't
80,
change.
it's 80-20 thing, right?
Yeah.
Where 80% of your work is there, and there's the 20% you have to fuss and fine tune. And there, let's face it, you can go too far. You can create a situation where people spend more time adjusting than producing something. But then if you just look at the number of sheets that aren't on, or rather views that are not on sheets in a project. It's always 3 to 1.
Yeah.
The number of views on sheets versus those that aren't. And I look at that, I'm like, why are there 3 times as many sheets not 3 times as many views not on sheets? Why?
Right.
Do you need them? Because if you need them, shouldn't they be on sheets?
Right. If they're important, then why are they not on sheets?
Yeah. I feel like I was joking the other day that it's like the basement. So for people who have basements, the stuff that goes in your basement is the things that you won't throw out because you might need it someday. Or if you don't have a basement, then it's your garage. So, honey, why do you have 6,000 bolts and nuts in this box? I might need one of them.
I need one day, yep. And then the one day you do, you're like, yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all these other ones, I don't need any of those. But this one, see, I told you I was going to need it someday. And I have had those moments.
Yeah.
Not even that long ago.
Yeah, I feel that right now. I have to clean out the garage, and I've been saying that to myself for a few weeks now. So Melissa from Parallax is here, and she said the template's actually bigger than last time Aaron was on the show. So
okay,
so it's even bigger than whatever it was.
Well, here's to your new template.
Awesome, great. I'm just checking.
So I don't remember where you live. Where are you again?
I'm in Connecticut. So
Connecticut. Yeah, okay. Because you said you were near somebody, but I thought that was Massachusetts when you said that. But
not New England. No, Connecticut.
I must have been mixing them up in my brain.
Nope.
So there's some snow.
Yeah, it's been trying to melt. It's been trying to melt the last couple of days, but we'll get like a 40-degree warm sun, and it'll melt a little, and then it'll drop. Right now it's like 9 degrees outside, so it's just ice again.
Well, my daughter moved to North Carolina. She and her boyfriend moved there. They're in Charlotte now, just north of Charlotte, and he races cars. And my wife has convinced me that we should make a road trip so we can be there for her birthday. So at the end of this month, we're hopping in my van and we're driving cross country.
That's awesome.
So we're gonna visit friends in Nashville, go to Charlotte, visit a friend in Huntsville, Alabama, and then we're gonna drive north to New York and visit my family.
Nice.
And that kind of stuff. So
good. In a week or so,
and then make the trek back.
Yeah, in a week or so, it may get a little warmer. We're hoping. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, I'm just hoping to avoid a snowstorm.
You never know. March is always good for at least one. It's always good for one around here.
Well, I moved to California in March of 2004, and the week before we left, Fulton, New York, which is 45 miles north of Syracuse,
Mm-hmm.
had 7 feet of snowfall in 1 week. One week, 7 feet of snow. They had one school day.
Well,
but they have snow blowers and plows that are taller than a man.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they can handle
let's
it.
hope that's not the case this year. I'm ready for spring. I was just double checking to make sure there's no other comments or questions in the chat. Looks like no, we got some good conversation going on. Nothing major for questions. So yeah, I think this has been a lot of fun, man. I appreciate it. I think whether you realize it or not, I think we hit some extremely valuable quality points there with how to approach initially looking at models. So I appreciate it. I mean, that's I found some nuggets there myself. I mean, I haven't cleaned warnings in quite some time, and so refreshing the brain of the calculations, the room stuff especially. I mean, I had a conversation the other day about someone with placeholder rooms and not placed rooms, and what are they and why are they there, and blah blah blah. And so it clicked in my mind again. It's like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense.
Well, the other thing I'd mentioned that we could talk about briefly was shared coordinates is never brief, but I have a draft blog post, which will probably be several if I ever finish them, about my sort of current approach to dealing with shared coordinates.
Oh, awesome.
Primarily because I live in BIM 360 mostly now, and published coordinates isn't an option. Mm-hmm. So everything I'm doing now is based on the assumption that I can use acquire. One of the things.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
I mean, if you need to cut it off, we can do that.
No, I honestly, I think that could probably be an entire episode in the future. Okay. One I do. I actually had Nick from Revit Pure on like a year and a half ago, just talking the basics of coordinate systems and survey points and sharing. It was great, but I do think that and part of the reason why I think it would be a great full episode is adding the BIM 360 tweak on top of it, because everyone for better or worse is going that way. I do think that the collaboration for Revit and the Saved Essential, especially since you and I have lived in the Revit server days and the WAN accelerators and the freaking all the crap that we used to deal with to try and work remotely using Revit. That I have to say I give Autodesk a ton of credit for. Saving Essential and cloud work sharing is phenomenal. But like you just said, there's a lot of caveats to the linking, the coordinates, and all that stuff. And so honestly, I think once you've panned out and maybe even published the blog post, maybe that's when you can come back on and we can do an entire episode on that. I think, honestly, I really do. And I think people would eat it up, man.
or throw hate mail at us.
Either one. So no, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you coming on and thinking it over and actually saying yes. I appreciate that. I'm sure everyone here does. For anyone who doesn't realize or doesn't know sort of the background to it, is I emailed the audience basically in the beginning of January and said, is there anyone that you want me to come on that hasn't been a guest on the show yet? And Steve was mentioned a couple times, and that's when I emailed him and said, dude, what do you think? And so I appreciate you guys reaching out and saying, ask Steve.
Well, thanks for remembering me.
I'm telling you, man, whether you think it or not, even if you didn't post for the rest of your life, people will still be finding your old content. So we all
I wrote on my blog, I said, I'm crawling out from under my rock. Yeah.
You can go back up for a little bit if you want. It's up to you.
I just have my head down now. I mean, don't stick it outside for very often. And plus, the reality is I spend more time on music. So every non-work hour is getting deeper into music. So.
Well, I can appreciate that. Unfortunately, with two very young children now, the guitars have stayed. Actually, I shouldn't say that. The guitars, the jazz.
You can see one working there. I'm trying to. I don't know if learning is even really the right word, but
my jazz
I'm
guitar
at it.
and my Stratocaster and the amp have stayed a little quiet, but the acoustic comes out, and I'm learning a lot of children's style music. So I can tell you I'm still playing, but not nearly as much as I used to.
I didn't even buy this. This turned up in my house after one of Jake's friends left it overnight once, and and he never came back for it. Moved away.
Awesome,
So I
man.
said, well, I might as well put new strings on it and see what happens.
Well, I appreciate you putting the drumsticks aside for a little bit, just hanging out with
Yep.
us, sharing your knowledge, and I'm sure everyone else appreciates it too. So, like I said, man, once you've wrapped your mind around how you would like to present that shared chord and stuff, and maybe even have the blog post out, reach out,
Sure.
and we'll come back on, and I know people will enjoy it. So. I don't think I need to ask people or ask you to tell people where to find you, Revit Op-Ed, and then I'll put links to Revit Op-Ed.
If anyone's interested in the other social media, I use Instagram it's just Steve_Stafford at Instagram. I use that for music posts. Awesome. So if anyone's interested in seeing what I'm doing there, they can do that. Twitter, I'm on Twitter as well, but I never tweet. I mostly just read it. Read what people are doing.
I will put links to Twitter, Instagram, and your blog below. Great.
And I have to.
Great chat, man. I appreciate
it. I keep forgetting LinkedIn exists, so I have to keep remembering to go log on to LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm terrible about all that.
LinkedIn as well. Awesome, man.
And I only joined Facebook because my mom made me. So.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is getting used more than Facebook these days, but we won't go down that rabbit hole right now. Well, thanks again, Steve. I appreciate it. Thank you guys, everyone, for showing up. Thank you, Twinmotion, for sponsoring this episode. Remember to head on over to twinmotion.com/BIMAfterDark. You guys are amazing. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for showing up live. And I'll see you all this time next week. Cheers and have an awesome night.
Night.
Awesome, man.